Going into the 2026 season, is it time to ask the question, should someone other than Sean Payton be calling plays for the Denver Broncos going forward? And has Jamal Murray's all-star season here in 2025 elevated the expectations for him moving forward with the Denver Nuggets? All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel. You can find us at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're watching us on X or on Facebook, really any platform, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and turn on those post notifications so that you never miss a moment with us. It's time to get into the action here. Let's start with the Denver Broncos, who got a big announcement yesterday that was coming off of the heels of the conversation we had during yesterday's show about the shuffling of the coaching staff and specifically the coordinator roles for the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton makes the decision to move on from Joe Lombardi, who he has worked with in some capacity as a consigliere of sorts for 15 years. It also meant the departures of Pete Carmichael and Jim Leonard on the defensive side of the ball. Vance Joseph stays with the Broncos despite getting a decent amount of interest in the initial parts of the coaching cycle in the interviews. And that might hint at another example of why the NFL's hiring, the cyclical nature of the hiring cycle is a little bit of a broken process. But I think the Broncos benefit from said broken process, and I'm not going to be one necessarily to complain too hard about that. By far, the most intriguing shuffle of the deck in this offseason when it comes to the Broncos coaching staff, though, is who the Broncos' new offensive coordinator is going to be. And it was announced yesterday that quarterbacks coach Davis Webb, the kind of budding offensive wonderkind who emerged in the offseason as somebody who, despite never calling plays in an official regular season game, despite only being a positional coach of any kind at the NFL level for a handful of seasons, is already being considered by many to be someone who's ready to be a head coach right now. That kind of hype and buzz had a lot of people thinking, well, Davis Webb's going to be gone. Look at the opportunities that were available. He got multiple interviews with the Las Vegas Raiders. He had interest from the Buffalo Bills, where he played as Josh Allen's backup quarterback. There was potential speculation that he might go, even for an offensive coordinator type position, to a number of different teams who shuffled their head coaching lineup. But ultimately, as was announced yesterday, Davis Webb is staying here in the Mile High City to take over the offensive coordinator duties from Joe Lombardi. But what does that mean exactly? Because as is the case with most offensive-minded head coaches in the NFL, they serve as the primary play caller, does the head coach, which leaves the offensive coordinator's role a little bit ambiguous and murky and maybe subject to some interpretation, right? There's obviously the week of practice leading up. You've got installs, you've got meetings, you've got game planning, you've got kind of the sounding board in the headset during games and on the sideline. There's also probably practice of observational responsibilities that are segmented to the offensive coordinator, not the head coach. But Davis Webb's kind of surge upward in the offseason for a guy whose stock literally couldn't be higher at this current moment is starting to make a lot of people ask a very fair question. Should Sean Payton hand over play calling duties to Davis Webb in the 2026 season? It's an interesting question because Sean Payton's been one of the brighter offensive minds, and certainly over a catalog of basically 2 decades of sample size, has proven to be one of the better offensive-minded head coaches in the National Football League during his tenure. He coached a Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees. He won a Super Bowl, brought a franchise there first, all of those things. But the sample size on offense that we have seen from Sean Payton during his tenure with the Denver Broncos leaves the door open for some speculation. First, it was Russell Wilson that was the problem, right? Sean Payton got maybe some of the best football out of Russ that we've seen over an extended period of time, like a full season, since Russ left Seattle. Significantly better than what was the case with Nathaniel Hackett. And then I would argue that were a lot of points where Russ looked better as a member of the Broncos than he has at multiple of his other stops along the way, Pittsburgh, New York, etc. And then he gets Bo Nix, right? And that wipes away excuse number one. Well, Sean had to deal with Russell Wilson, right? He took on the largest dead cap hit at the time in NFL history in order to move on from Russ and handpicked his quarterback in Bo Nix. Shouldn't be any more excuses, right? But naturally, that's not how it works. Bo's a rookie quarterback. You never know how it's going to, how it's going to unfold, how he's going to take to Sean Payton's system. In the first 4 games of Bo Nix's NFL career, he clearly looked like a guy that was drinking through a fire hose, right? The Sean Payton system is notoriously complex to learn from a studying standpoint with all of the different formations, personnel changes, cycling in and out, et cetera, et cetera. With the mindset of doing these things to kind of keep a defense on their toes, never allow them to settle into a rhythm, and constantly have to be worried about barrage after barrage, wave after wave of these different formations that can attack you in different ways while looking similar on a particular front. There's been speculation and word around the NFL circles that maybe Sean Payton's system is having an opposite effect now at this point, and that maybe his way of thinking is a bit antiquated and it's easier to defend, as evidenced by the game against the New England Patriots, where the Broncos put up 1 offensive touchdown, albeit with a backup quarterback, in an AFC Championship game. But Davis Webb had enough interest out there, both from a head coaching perspective with the interviews that he garnered and as an offensive coordinator, which would be the next logical step in his career trajectory, of course, to make me think that him staying in Denver doesn't come without some form of advancement or opportunity that goes beyond just getting a different name on your business card. Because Davis Webb could have been an offensive coordinator in a lot of places and certainly would have called plays. Doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to here with the Broncos, and I think it's going to be a fascinating offseason to see how that dynamic plays out and what more is said and observed about that dynamic as we get into training camp, the preseason, etc. But I'll tell you this, I'm not against it. I'm not against the idea of Davis Webb calling plays. I think Sean Payton has been overly criticized and scrutinized at times for what he's been able to do offensively. What Sean Payton has accomplished by turning the Denver Broncos from the most downtrodden period and the worst stretch of football in their franchise existence to what they are now, where they were on the doorstep of a Super Bowl and a return to Santa Clara, save not for an ankle injury to Bo Nix that kind of derailed them, should not be understated in terms of the degree of difficulty, the magnitude, and the scope of everything that went into it. However, I think going into another year of Sean Payton, going into year 3 with Sean and Bo as a quarterback head coach combo, a very important year, I think, for the path and trajectory of the Denver Broncos, for the growth and development in a continued sense of Bo Nix. I think Sean Payton has to, at a minimum, be open to loosening his grip on the play calling reins here. Davis Webb is a major reason why Bo Nix has been able to absorb, digest, and then translate the teachings and the system of Sean Payton onto the field for the Denver Broncos. There is a clear mind meld and connection there that is allowing a young quarterback, despite all the experience he had in college, to be able to do what he's done in such a short period of time. Something that we see so many young quarterbacks, including one who's playing in the Super Bowl right now, fail to do in their first stints or stops in the NFL. And that's not the case with the Broncos. And if you liked and loved Davis Webb enough to make sure you kept him in the building by giving him a promotion, don't at the same time sweep the leg from underneath him or hamstring that by making it basically a promotion in title and input, but not actually having it translate into the game day operations. I think Davis Webb has proven, both in the preseason game and just with his acumen and what he's built up in the building, to be able to have a crack at this. And I think the worst that could happen is that it doesn't work and Sean can tighten that grip again, just the same way that Dan Campbell did after Ben Johnson left to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. I don't think there's really a downside to letting Davis Webb in on this play calling party, and I sincerely hope that Sean Payton is on board with at least dipping the toe in that water for the betterment of not just Bo, but the Denver Broncos and his chance of becoming the first head coach in NFL history to win a Super Bowl with two different franchises. It is time to hit the turn, presented by The Birdie Bar, Louisville's premier outdoor golf bar and entertainment venue. With their miniature golf setup and heated patio, they have the perfect cure for your winter blues. I want to shift gears here to the Denver Nuggets, who I think we've had a lot of conversations about this Nuggets squad, starting with the offseason that came out with an unbelievable bang. Co-executive vice presidents Ben Tenzer and Jonathan Wallace, in their first goes as key executives with a franchise, came out guns blazing with all of the roster moves that they made, which were all made possible by the trading of Michael Porter Jr. to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Cameron Johnson, and the flexibility that that gave them to be able to wheel and deal, similarly to how Chris McFarland, his his ball arena co-tenant there with the Avalanche, slicing Mikko Rantanen off of the Avalanche pie to then break that up into as many pieces as he did and kind of create some more depth and scoring opportunity up and down the roster. That's what we got from the Nuggets in this past offseason. And then we got to see what this Nuggets squad looked like healthy. And even with Cam Johnson struggling in the early onset to kind of find his footing and find his rhythm, boy, did we see some pretty impressive basketball when the Nuggets are at full health and full strength. There's been 15 games where that's been the case over the course of this NBA season so far, and the Nuggets are 12-3 in those 15 games. The addition of Big Val, Jonas Valanciunas, to be a backup big and a serviceable depth piece in the front court for Jokic to be able to spell him some minutes. He started the season averaging about 4 to 5 minutes less per game than he was at any point in his recent stretch of his career, especially last season. Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, who's coming into stride late after starting a little bit slower. The injuries just seem to derail it all, right? Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon, Jonas Valanciunas, then Cam Johnson, then Nikola Jokic. It's been a rough go, even with Jamal Murray, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, and others dealing with their own smaller sections of injury pockets throughout the season. It's been a little bit of a rough go, and I think it's kind of spun a lot of people's heads around, myself included, as to say, do we need to modify our expectations? Is the goal we set out with at the beginning of the season still something that's feasibly within the reach? And I think that it is. And I think that the reason why we can still feel so confidently, one of the reasons why, certainly, is the way that the team has played and battled through the injury adversity, especially when Jokic went down with his hyperextended knee injury and missed a little over a month or so of basketball. We saw this Nuggets team beat a Philadelphia 76ers team without any of their 5 starters and without 2 key depth pieces in reserve fashion. We saw them go toe-to-toe the other night with the Detroit Pistons team, who's one of the hottest teams in the NBA and certainly in the Eastern Conference. We saw them at full strength feel like they could beat anybody in a Western Conference playoff showdown with the Houston Rockets. We saw them play the Minnesota Timberwolves the way that they did. We've seen the battle-tested resilience that this squad has embodied. And I think the major catalyst behind that, one being Peyton Watson and the unfortunately a little bit timed just surge into the NBA stratosphere that he's experiencing this season as a bona fide NBA star, but also the all-star season we're getting from Jamal Murray. Jamal averaging career highs in 4 major statistical categories right now, becomes a Western Conference All-Star reserve for the 2026 All-Star Game, marking not just the first in his 9-year NBA career, but it now is going to be the first time that Nikola Jokic has played alongside a current All-Star teammate in his entire NBA career, spanning more than a decade now. I do think that Jamal Murray's all-star caliber play this season has and should elevate the expectations that we have for him going forward, and not for any newfound reason. I think this is the thing we've been talking about with Jamal for years now. We've seen the tantalizing nature of his play. When Jamal Murray's shot is falling and when he's in his bag, it is as fun to watch as any player in the National Basketball Association. It's legitimately, to use a word that gets overused probably, special. It's legitimately special what he's able to do. The two-man game that he's developed with Nikola Jokic and the way that he has been able to kind of keep this team afloat, or certainly help doing so, despite all the injuries falling like flies around him for the Nuggets, he has been able to steady that tide. And I think that it just reaffirms for me not just his importance on the roster as the second best player on a title contending team, and in 2023's case, a title winning team, but the fact that if the Nuggets are going to climb that mountaintop again, this is the version of Jamal that they need, and frankly, not a whole lot less. They really, in my opinion, can't accept a whole lot less than the 2026 all-star caliber reserve Jamal that we are getting right now. Jokic is going to be Jokic. The depth pieces that they brought in, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jonas Valanciunas, they're going to play their part. Cameron Johnson and Christian Brown, when fully healthy and not dealing with the nagging injuries that we've seen even since their returns to the court in spurts, are going to be able to play their part. But those parts, to me, mean less or impact less if Robin doesn't have his cape on. Batman is there, but Jamal Murray is the Robin of this basketball team. And if he is not playing his part the way that we've seen him, from a mental transformation to a physical transformation, and the way he approached the offseason and how it's manifested itself during this regular season, if he is not on, it genuinely, to me, puts a cloudy ceiling of sorts on whether or not this Nuggets team is going to be able to go the distance in a Western Conference that is going to be a gauntlet to get through. The Oklahoma City Thunder may have come back down to earth a little bit, but as we saw earlier this week when they squared off head-to-head with the Nuggets, they're still a formidable foe. The Nuggets would have the advantage of a 7-game series to try to overcome that and crack it, and they certainly did in the postseason, taking them to 7 games last year. But the game board has shaken up a little bit, and I don't know how much confidence I have in the Nuggets to be able to go that distance if Jamal Murray isn't the Jamal Murray that we're seeing right now. So it feels weird on a team with Nikola Jokic to talk about whether or not a title or a championship hope hinges on a player other than him, but it kind of does. Jokic obviously has to be himself, but in my opinion, we've seen Jokic being Jokic and doing unbelievable things fall short a number of times in the postseason, and Jamal is the biggest catalyst to stopping that from happening once again. Which brings us to our weekly poll question to close things out here. How many more All-Star nominations will Jamal Murray earn in his career with the Denver Nuggets? 1, 2, 3 or more? If there's a write-in, if you have a different number in mind, feel free to drop it, leave in the comments. You can go vote now at DEN Sports 1043 or at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube and on X. We will compile the votes at the end of the week, and we will catch you tomorrow at noon for the next rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.